Ladies and gents, a very good evening to all of you, and thank you so much for taking the time to come across this evening. It's going to be a 55-minute talk thereabouts, roughly something like that. Not going into great depth on anything because realistically, in 55 minutes to an hour, you just can't go into a lot of depth. Online safety is a huge area. I've been working in this area since around about 2006. And there's still an awful lot I don't know, quite frankly. We're finding out new things all the time. New research is giving us new indications on certain things that are going out there, and new things are cropping up all the time. So it's a difficult area to keep up with. And so the purpose of this evening is really to take you through some basics. And if any of you have seen me speak at Maltsford before, we're going to be covering a few of the basics over again. I think it's important to bring those sorts of things, back to the forefront of our minds, especially if it has been a couple of years for you. So, like I say, I've been working in this area since around about 2006. But in a voluntary capacity, I also work with Lincolnshire Police and their Pollitt team. Pollitt is their paedophile online investigations team. I'm not going into that tonight. However, I would ask you to bear in mind that towards the end of this talk, I will be delving into exploitation, specifically child sexual exploitation. I'm not going to be going into any details or anything, but just more to do with statistics. So with that in mind, I would please ask you to bear in mind who is around you, as in children. So if you've got this on speaker, close the door or put some headphones on, something like that. There's not going to be anything on the screen. Please don't worry about that. It's just going to be the things that I say. What I've also said to Mrs. Squire is that because there's a fair bit to get through, and in a session like this, even if I was standing in front of you, it's very difficult for me actually to show you things. In other words, how things work. So, for example, a couple of questions have come through in relation to, are there any parental features on TikTok and Instagram, and how do we set up internet filters and this type of thing? I can't show you that. I can't show you that even if we were in the school. So what I'm going to do is, over the course of the next few days, I'm going to put a very simple Microsoft Word document together with some links to videos, some links to explainer documents or articles, and that there to point you in the right direction. So please don't worry about having to write anything down. If I do give you any links as part of this talk, I'm going to be sending out a Word document to Mrs. Squire, and she will get that out to all of you. So please don't panic in relation to that. One of the first things to go through, and perhaps one of the most important things, is the four C's: content, contact, conduct, and commerce. And the reason I say it's one of the most important things is because there is no such thing as a list of risks and issues. There never has been, and there never will be. If you think about it in real life rather than online, there's no such thing as a list of risks and issues. It's impossible to create such a thing. So what we do in an online capacity is we categorize the risks. And by doing so, it makes things really easy for us to understand. So forgetting all the sub-bullet points, if you just look at the main four C's on there, consider yourself, for example, if your child is asking you if they can buy a game or download a game or use a particular app. The easiest way to think about it is by using the four C's. In other words, content, what will they see? And am I happy with that? Contacts, are there engagements or chat features and such like in there? Can I turn those chat features off? Conduct, if I allow them to use or play this game, what will their behavior be? And then commerce. In this context, commerce is quite an easy one. Are there things like in-game purchases, in-app purchases, scams, and that type of thing? So by getting back to the basics, this sort of thing makes things really, really easy for us to consider, because there's no way we're going to know all the games and all the apps and everything that is out there. What is important for us as individual parents and carers is knowing about what our children are using and what it is that they're seeing. But the main points I've put, or the sub bullet points, if you like, that I've put on there, are perhaps the more concerning ones at the moment. And I will go through a couple of these as we go through, and I'll give examples and such like as well. And the first example I want to come on to is, I think it's a very important, it's a very prominent one right now, and that's in relation to the first C, content, which is in relation to algorithms specifically. Now, a lot of the content that we see online, whether it's via YouTube, whether it's via Google, whether it's on an app such as TikTok or Snapchat or, whatever it is, much of this content is driven by algorithms. So what I mean by that is we may feel as though we have a large degree of control over what we are seeing online. The reality, though, is very, very different. These things, don't forget, these things are built to make money. That's the bottom line with all of this. And algorithms are a part of this. Algorithms are used so that the company can decide what we see, and that decision is made by code and machine learning. Now, algorithms generally do a good job, don't get me wrong. I personally would rather an algorithm show me things that it thinks I might want to see. However, there is also a flip side to that as well. And you can't really have, not seen some of the more serious and the tragic cases that have come out of late. And so, for example, the tragic case of Molly Russell, who sadly committed suicide a few years ago now. But at the coroner's inquiry, the coroner determined that the algorithms that the companies were using, and this was specific to Pinterest and Instagram, if memory serves me right, it was a lot of the content that was being shown to Molly who was using Instagram and Pinterest at the time. And a lot of this content was things like self-harm and pro-suicide and these types of things. So there's always that, a lot of the algorithmic use is very, very positive, but sadly there is always that negative side to it. And algorithms have really come to the fore over the last year. I mean, they've been used by online services for years and years. I'm sure we all recognize that. But I think with the tragic cases such as Molly Russell that we're seeing in the media, the public in general now are starting to see these things for what they actually are. And now there's a very large public outcry, to say to companies, you've got to do something about this. And the reality is, yes, they're absolutely right. Now, fingers crossed, you may be aware of the online safety bill that has just gone through Parliament. It's about to reach the House of Lords very, very soon. And the penalties to companies if they fail to protect children under their duty of care are, they're quite substantial. But what we want to see is real positive action, and algorithms are a part of that. They are a fundamental part of that. Now, I know one of the questions from one of the parents, hopefully one of the parents is here tonight, was in relation to Andrew Tate, for example. Well, this is a classic example of algorithms, and the question is, why is my son seeing this sort of content? The reality is probably that your son is not searching for this type of content. We don't see that very much at all. Children generally don't search for this type of content. It's content that is being driven to them. It's being driven to their content feeds. And the likelihood is that is how they're finding or viewing this type of content, and sadly, it's a vicious cycle. So if they watch one video, for example, or if they watch one short form video on TikTok, the algorithm goes, oh, hello, you watched that one, so you might want to see more of them. So here's some more, and here's some more, and it's a vicious cycle, and it's never ending. And the reality is that there isn't an awful lot you can do about that, and it's really, really frustrating. And I hear the frustration coming from parents, every time I hear about them. Now, there's a lot of talk about Andrew Tate at the moment, but what we need to remember, ladies and gents, is Tate is one of tens of thousands out there. He's just the media sensation at the moment. He's just the big one that's out there right now. But there are many, many more like that. So it's not always. Let me step back a bit. This can be in itself, this can be an incredibly difficult one to tackle, and there are many different reasons for that. So, for example, you might be aware of parasocial relationships. I mean, the theory of parasocial relationships has been around for a long, long time, ever since the radio was invented, I think. So it's nothing new at all. But its relation to online is really in the early stages of research. So let me give you an example, and I'll use Tate as an example of this. I don't know if you've ever seen any of Tate's videos, or if you've just heard about him in the newspaper or anything. People like Tate are very clever at what they do. They're called influencers for a reason, because they are incredibly influential. And when you've got young people moving through adolescence, they're most vulnerable in relation to being convinced that certain things are right and certain things are wrong. And people like Tate, they're very clever at what they do. And you've really got to listen. You've really got to read between the lines of what he's actually saying to understand, what it is that he's actually doing. And it's a very, very difficult one. So, for example, I was speaking to a school. I was speaking to a safeguarding leader in a school just a few days ago. And it was really interesting to hear that within the school, they'd had a conversation with the girls in the school in relation to Andrew Tate. And a lot of these girls said they liked him. But the reason they liked him is because he was anti-drugs and, and all sorts of other things. And they liked that. So when we're looking at parasocial relationships, this is how clever this is how these people manipulate things. So, for example, here I am now. I'm speaking to you on camera, but from your perspective, I'm not speaking to 5 people, 10 people, 50,000 people. I'm speaking to you. This is me and you having a conversation. And these influencers, they know this. So what they do is they personalize their talks. And essentially what that does is that up here, that creates a bond. It creates a relationship. And we see this all the time. You may have seen examples in the media of actors, for example, actors who play really nasty parts, and then the people in the street start shouting at them for something that they've done on the telly. That's a parasocial relationship. They're not seeing the real person. They're seeing the person that person is playing, if that makes sense. And all of this makes it really, really difficult. Now, the whole thing of Andrew Tate and misogynistic content and everything else that we're seeing, and we are seeing this rising, by the way. We are definitely, there's no doubt about it. We're seeing it with older boys, and we're now starting to see it in prep and primary schools as well. But this whole thing, if you like, in general terms, is called the manosphere. I have no idea who makes up these words, quite honestly, so don't blame me. But generally speaking, it's called the manosphere. And this goes into lots of areas, such as the incel movements, so the involuntary celibates movements, and all sorts of other things as well. And they have some weird and wonderful terminology, such as the red pill and the blue pill. And again, if you've listened to any of Tate's videos, he talks about the Matrix, and a lot of the terminology comes from the Matrix, such as the red pill and the blue pill. And so I just wanted to quickly cover that, because it is a very prominent one right now. And the reality is that there is no solution to this. My advice to any of you is, if you are hearing this from your children, And first and foremost is don't challenge it. You know, that is the worst possible thing that we can do, because as soon as you challenge it, people are going to be talking about these things because they might have a belief, or it's it's a curiosity that they've got, and things that are being said, they might agree with it. So if you challenge that, the first thing that happens, especially with an adolescent, is the shutters come down and the wall goes up, and that is, and you'll be well aware of that. You know, that is what happens. The only real solution with this at the moment is to have very open and honest discussions with children and young people about these particular issues. And it's not about changing their minds. It's not about challenging them. It's about giving them the information so that they can critically think for themselves. So it's about asking their opinions on, certain things. And again, not challenging that, but just having an open discussion with them again, so that hopefully they can critically think for themselves and actually start to change their thoughts and opinions around it. So again, I just thought that was just a very quick one, but I thought it was a very important one to go through, because it is a very prominent one at the moment that we're seeing, well, all over, quite frankly. So let's get into the main thrust of this evening, and this is the activities and the 4 Cs in relation to children and young people. So very, very simplistically, the main online activities of children are gaming, YouTube, and social media. Of course, lots and lots of things underneath that, but these are the main aspects. And like I previously said, the 4 Cs are the main areas that we want to consider as part of that. Now, gaming is obviously a huge aspect of many children and young people's lives, both boys and girls. It's a complete myth that it's mainly boys out there playing games. It isn't at all. It's an equal split. And the only difference is that the types of games that they generally, and again, that's very general, that they tend to play. Now, I'm not going to go into games per se, but there is a really important point that I do want to mention about this. And first of all, the motivations or the reasons why children play games are usually, self-explanatory, fun, sometimes for education, sometimes because they're just bored, a cold wintry night out there and there's, nothing much to do, perhaps live in a rural area, etc., etc. But I think one of probably the biggest points that I would like to take you away from the gaming aspect is that for a large majority of children and young people who play their games, it's not really about having fun. It has to be fun, else they wouldn't do it. But it is mainly about socializing with their friends. Now, that's important to understand for a lot of different reasons, but a real classic one is screen time. The good old word screen time. Now, I don't like screen time. I don't generally tend to use the word screen time. And the reason for that is screen time is always talked about in the negative. For me, it's not about screen time, it's about screen use. In other words, what are they actually doing? For me, time is really low down on the list of my concerns. So what I mean by that is, if you think that the motivation for many children and young people in relation to gaming is so that they can play with their friends, well, of course they're going to want to spend as much time as they can behind their screens and on their games as they can. So what I'm trying to do is, perhaps ask you to think about this from a slightly different angle. Rather than worrying about the time, be concerned about the use, or that's the thing for me. And the reason I say that is that you will never ever be able to sort out the time unless you sort out the underlying issue, if there is one, which brings me to the next point: coping mechanism. And this is much more rare. It was a relatively big issue during lockdown, and pre and post lockdown. We are still seeing this, and this is where some children will use their games as a means of escape. So that could be for multiple reasons. It might be something which is relatively benign. It could be something which is quite serious. So, for example, that could be a simple falling out with a friend. On the other side of the spectrum, It could be a very serious illness or even a death in their family. And so this is where a child might use their games as a means of escaping whatever is going on up here. And this is why I say to you, ladies and gents, please don't concentrate on the time too much. Time can be an issue. There's always got to be a balance. Don't get me wrong, of course there has. But if you're concerned about screen time, try to figure out what the underlying issue is behind that time. More often than not, you'll find it's just because they want to be with their mates. That's the big one. But now and again, it's something more deep than that. And there's no way you'll sort out the time unless you dig deeper. So that's a really important point I wanted to make. What about the risks then in relation to the four C's? Well, I'll give you a couple of examples as we go through this. And they're going to sound quite obvious. So, for example, the content. Content is usually where you get the age ratings for on the games, the PEGI ratings or the ESRB ratings. Don't worry if you don't know what they mean. Basically, it's the age ratings you see in the app stores, the play stores, or even old school. If you go out and buy your games from WH Smith's or whatever it is, the age rating is on the front of the game there. Personally, I don't put too much reliance on the age ratings. And the reason I say that, excuse me, the reason I say that is that I've seen lots of games which I think are way overrated. Equally, I've seen lots of games which I think are way underrated. So for me, the age rating is a starting point. It's a starting point so I can make my own informed decision. And if you don't know how to do that, bear with me and I will show you, or I will indicate to you in just a moment. Contact, lots of games these days have contact features in them. You know, the many games are all about engagement these days. Conduct is, you know, if a child is playing their game, what is their behavior? So, for example, if they're just allowed to play fortnight after fortnight after fortnight over and over and over again for hours, you know, what is there going to be their behavior? Is the behavior going to start going down and down and down? Or if they're playing 18 rated games, you know, very violent war type games, what is their behavior going to be? And then the commercial aspect is things like in-game purchases, in-app purchases, and that type of thing. To give you an example of content, I'll use Roblox as the example here. And I'm not picking on Roblox, it's just because it's one of the more popular ones across the age ranges out there. Now, some games, not all games, but some games, excuse me, they have they have an age filter on them. So, for example, in the case of Roblox, Roblox has an age filter which is 13. So basically, what that means is when you create your Roblox profile, if you indicate by putting in your year of birth that you are 13 years of age or over, all contact features are turned on, which means that your child can talk to anybody, anybody can talk to your child. If, when creating your profile, you indicate that you're 12 or under, all contact features are turned off by default. So what does this mean? Well, when I speak to children and I ask them about things like age ratings and, you know, what age do they put into their games or their social apps or, you know, whatever else it is that they're using, I generally get three answers, three interesting answers, lots of different answers, but three interesting answers. So, for example, many children will say that they don't put their true year of birth into their games and apps. And there are three main reasons for that. The first reason is because they just click OK on whatever the first year is that is shown to them. So that might be, I don't know, 1971, 2008, you know, whatever it is. So they just click OK on the first one. So that's for ease and simplicity. You know, that's the reason for it. The second reason is because many children are well aware of this cutoff age of 13 on some of the games and the apps that are out there. And they know that if they indicate that they are younger than 13, that they will either not be able to use the app or not have all of the features enabled within the game. The third reason is the one that I find most interesting of all. And children, some children will say they do not put in their true year of birth because they've been told don't share personal information online. Now, how interesting is that? Because that's exactly what we tell them. You know, it's really, really interesting. And it just goes to show that some of the messages, you know, the very historic and old messages that we give to children, some of these have got to start changing. And when I say it's not going to be for all children, but I would be certainly saying from perhaps year 5, but definitely year 6 upwards. And the reason I say that is because if you think about it, it is not possible not to share personal information online. It is utterly impossible. The only way it can't happen is if you just never ever turn the internet on in your life. It literally is, you know, as simple as that. So when we're using messages to the children, such as don't share personal information, we've got to apply context to that. It's not about don't share personal information. It's about being careful about what information you are sharing and with whom. So, for example, it's the appropriate test, if you like. So, for example, if you're creating a profile in Roblox, so that you can play your game, you've got to share personal information. There's the context. It is an appropriate reason to do so. You know, that's the point I'm making there. So a second example here would be in relation to commercialism, and we all know, you know, many games are all about the commercialism. Most online services are about commercialism these days. I'll use Fortnite as an example here, simply because, again, Fortnite is just one of the more popular ones that's out there. And if your boys are starting to talk about Fortnite a lot more at the moment than they have been over the past few months, that's just because season 4 or chapter 4 has just come out. So, you know, we're going to see a reinvigoration of Fortnite out there, I don't doubt. Now, there is a lot of commercial in these games, from in-game purchases of loot boxes and skins and power-ups and V-Bucks and Robux and FIFA coins, and you know, you name it, everything that is out there. And again, interesting conversations with the boys, with the students here, and it can be an interesting conversation when you get around to things like peer pressure. And a lot of the children, they do talk about peer pressure in their games, again, in many ways. So, for example, in this respect, it'd be things like purchasing skins and loot boxes. By the way, if you don't know what a skin is, I didn't explain that. If you don't know what a skin is, have you seen the design on the characters there? That's a skin. It's the design, literally, that's it. Loot boxes, the best way of describing loot boxes is that it is simply a treasure chest, for want of a better word. That's all it is. Children feel, some children feel this peer pressure within their games to purchase virtual items in order to either look unique, be better at the game, be better than everybody else, especially their peers, you know, or whatever it is. Excuse me, and it can be quite an interesting conversation quite often. But again, this is where things can take you down a slightly different path sometimes. So, you know, if you are somebody who does not allow your child to buy things in games, or if you only allow a set amount per week, or you know, whatever it is, according to the children, there is still that peer pressure there. And you know, don't forget that you know, for some parents, they can't afford £1 a week, £2 a week, and mind, you know, £20 a week or whatever it is to buy some of these stuff. But again, for children, they still feel this pressure. They still want their V-Bucks, they still want their Robux in order to buy these virtual items. So where do they go? Well, they go to YouTube. And they'll put a search into YouTube, such as how do I get free V-Bucks? How do I get free Robux? Something like that. And if you put that search term into YouTube, it will come up with thousands and thousands of different results. The trouble is, ladies and gents, is there is no such thing as free virtual currency, or it's very, very rare to come across free virtual currency. The fact of the matter is that all of these videos on YouTube are scams. It's as simple as that. They are scams, and this is how children are falling prey to scams. So, for example, you'll have some so-called influencer. So if you look at the top video on the screen there, that one's, you know, it's had 2.3 million views in 5 months, and some children will look at this and they'll go, well, it must be true because it's had, you know, it's had over 2 million views. So you know, they'll watch the video, they'll listen to the influencer, and they'll carry out the instructions. And in this case, the instructions are, well, I found a glitch in the code. That's all terminology that goes back to the Matrix yet again. I found a glitch in the code, and all you need to do is click on a link in the description, and that link will take you to a web page, and all you've got to do is put in your gaming username, your gamer tag, and your password, and I will transfer 70,000 Robux into your account. Now, if you recognize that, that is what we call a phishing scam, phishing with a PH. So phishing scams are normally spoken about in relation to email. That's generally where we tend to see phishing scams. So, you know, you've had an email from PayPal or Netflix to say you've missed a payment, or there's a problem with your account, or, you know, something like that, and click on the link and it takes you to a page that looks, you know, it's exactly the same thing. But for children and young people, the likelihood of them clicking on something in email is tiny. It's absolutely tiny. They are much more likely to be scammed within YouTube or social media in relation to a phishing scam. So it just goes to show you where, you know, talking about one thing can lead you down a completely different avenue. We've gone from this gaming, children want to buy virtual items, there's peer pressure to buy these virtual items. They haven't got any money because mum or dad, you know, either won't give them any money, or, you know, they've put a block on, or the credit card details on the Xbox anymore, or, you know, whatever it is. So they will try to find a different avenue. In this case, they'll go to YouTube, and the likelihood is, if they do that, they will be scammed, you know, as a part of that. So, you know, it doesn't make it very easy at all. So I'm just going to come to the end of the gaming section there now, and don't worry, I'm going to put some further advice towards the end of this talk. So I'm not just bringing that to a straight stop here. I mentioned as part of that piece there that I view the age rating as my starting point. You know, I don't rely on the age or the content rating. I want to know more than that. I want to know more than what is the content of that game. I want to know, are there any drugs in there? I want to know, are there any chat features, and can I turn those features on or off? You know, I want to know so much more than this. Just a reminder to switch your microphones off, please, ladies and gents. And so I want to know more than this. So this is why I would say to you, ladies and gents, is if you're not a gamer and you want to know more about the games that your children are playing, and I would recommend that you should take a look into this, particularly if your son or daughter is asking you if they can download and play a game, or if they can buy a game because everybody else is playing it. You know, my first port of call is always commonsensemedia.org. Always, without fail. I generally don't tend to go anywhere else at all. It's a one-stop shop, and it's not just gaming, it's apps, it's even books and TV series, and it gives much, much more detail than just what is the content of that game. So for me, it's a one-stop shop. Okay. The next one I'm going to come on to is YouTube, and I'm not going to spend too long on this one at all. YouTube is clearly still very, very popular out there, but over the last few years, I've started to reduce the amount of time that I speak to children in relation to YouTube, and the reason for that is a lot of the historic concerns that we used to they haven't gone away. They do still crop up every now and again, but nowhere near the frequency of what they're used to. So for example, let me explain that. It was, what, 5 years ago, I think it probably was, something like that now. I could guarantee I would go into a primary or a prep school, talk about YouTube, and the children would be talking about videos such as hanging videos, beheading videos, and that type of thing. Just don't tend to hear about that anymore, apart from the odd thing here and there. Don't get me wrong, there are still concerns in relation to some of the content, but not to the extent that there used to be. I do think YouTube have started to clean up their act somewhat, and I think again a lot of that is due to public outcry, and quite rightly so. So just to put things into a little bit of context for us, this is a slide that really never changes at all. So if you think that every 60 seconds, over 500 hours of new video content is uploaded onto YouTube, that gives you the scale of the stuff that's up there. It is enormous. It is absolutely huge. And in relation to the types of videos that the children watch, again, this really doesn't change very much at all. The top four there, the how to, the gaming, the funny, and the music, really never change. And then you get the odd changes here and there, like, unboxing was popular for a time, not so much anymore. Slime videos were popular for a time, they're still out there, but not so much anymore. And, and lots of different things as well. But generally speaking, they don't tend to change, very much at all. And again, going back to this screen use I mentioned earlier on, lots and lots of children watch YouTube for educational reasons. They say that they watch how-to videos. And I think that's a very, very positive thing. Yes, there does have to be a balance, don't get me wrong. But if the children are using YouTube in an educational way, I personally don't have a problem with that. Obviously, I'm not going to let my children spend hours and hours. That's not the case. But if they're using these things positively, I do think that is a very, very good thing. But what about the risks? Again, back to the 4 Cs. I'll start from the bottom on this one. So the commercialism, well, YouTube is commercial. Google as a whole is commercial. It's about advertising, targeted advertising. Within YouTube videos, it's about, product advertising before and during the videos, product placements inside the videos, and also lots of other things such as I mentioned the scams in gaming as well. There's lots of scams and lots of misinformation and disinformation and such like, on YouTube. But again, don't forget, in schools, across the land, schools are teaching the children how to discern information properly, how to look out for misinformation, how to look out for disinformation, how to critically think about what they're seeing and what they're watching and what they're hearing from others. The children are being taught about this all the time from an early age. Conduct in this context, conduct is the behavior of the child. So in this context, it would be if a child is uploading videos onto YouTube. In my experience over the last few years, I've certainly seen quite a significant downturn in this. Not as many children sharing videos onto YouTube as there used to be. The days of lots and lots of children wanting to be YouTube influencers have gone away, although it hasn't necessarily gone away. What I'm seeing now is there are still many that want to be influencers, but the platform has changed. So it's not necessarily YouTube. It's actually now more to do with Snapchat and TikTok, if that makes sense. So still the same amount out there. It's just a platform that has changed. Contact-based risks in YouTube. I have never in all my time come across a contact-based risk or issue in YouTube. And that's simply because there aren't really any engagement features within YouTube. The only thing that you can loosely tie into that, and it's a very loose tie-in, is if a child has uploaded a video onto YouTube and they leave comments turned on. So when you upload a video, you basically get a tick box, comments on or comments off, and comments on is the default. And if somebody is leaving, nasty or inappropriate comments, that could be a contact-based issue. Theoretically, it isn't, but you can loosely tie that in. Content, I think, is perhaps the biggest area of concern for most, and I get that. And that's the reason why I contextualized YouTube at the beginning of this in relation to how much content is continually being uploaded. Now, historically, there hasn't really been an awful lot you can do in YouTube. The parental features within YouTube have always been very lax and very poor, quite frankly. But things have recently changed. So you may well be aware of restricted mode. So basically, restricted mode is the content filter which is in YouTube, and basically all restricted mode is if you have restricted mode turned on your devices, it basically means that nobody should be able to see content which is rated 18 or over. The trouble is, it's never actually been very good at that. You know, it's been pretty woeful in the past, quite honestly. However, things have changed. Things have changed quite significantly, and this was it July last year? I think it was perhaps July last year, where YouTube have brought out what's called supervised experience. So basically, instead of one level of filtering, you now get 3 levels of filtering, as you can see on the screen. So you get explore, explore more, and most of YouTube. And where I've put 9 plus, 30, and 13 plus, this is what YouTube recommend. But of course, you know, you can make your own decision on that. Now, the only way that you see supervised experience is if you are logged into Google. In other words, you've got a Gmail account. So don't forget, a Gmail email account gives you access to all of Google's services, which includes YouTube. So the only way you would see supervised experience is if you are logged in using a Google account. So what does that mean for children? I would advise, it's obviously your decision, but I would advise that if any of you have children under the age of 13, I would advise creating a Google account for them, a personal Google account. You can create Google accounts for children under the age of 13. That is possible to do that. And like I said, in that Microsoft Word document, I will send a link to you so that you can look at the benefits of that and how you actually do it. And the reason I say that is because if your child is actually logged in with their own account, you as a parent get more features available to you, and you've got more control. So in relation to supervised experience, what that means is that you can have Google Family Link, which is an app, on your phone, and regardless of what device or devices your children are logged onto, you can control the level of filtering from your phone through the Google Family Link app. Now, I think that is a great leap forward. I wish we'd seen this years ago, quite frankly, but you know, we are where we are. But I think that's a really, really good one. Now, in relation to the younger children, there's always been a problem with YouTube Kids. Now, I think YouTube Kids, which is for the very young children, I think YouTube Kids is fantastic. YouTube Kids is completely separate in many ways to the main YouTube service, and it keeps younger children within a safer walled garden. They have more of a walled garden experience where videos are pre-moderated, albeit by artificial intelligence, but they are pre-moderated into YouTube Kids. Now, the problem with that is a lot of the younger children that I talk to, and I ask them if they're using YouTube Kids, usually in a class of 30, for example, about 4 or 5 children will put their hands up to say, yeah, I use YouTube Kids. Now, the main reason for that is that the children say that the type of videos that they want to watch are not available in YouTube Kids. They're only available in the main YouTube accounts. And so that's always been a real problem area. Again, things have just changed. So if you've got younger children at home, you can now use a feature called Parents Allow Listing. So basically what that means is that you can keep the younger children within YouTube Kids, but as the adults, you know, your Google accounts will be linked to their Google accounts, and as the adults, you can individually allow individual videos or even channels into your child's YouTube Kids accounts from the main YouTube service. So basically, you as the parent becomes the moderator. So you might have 3 children, 5 children at home, and they've all got different accounts. You can allow or disallow for different children, depending on their age and what they want to watch, and and everything else. Again, that I think that is a great leap forward. I think it is a fantastic addition that is out there. And I think it gives parents a much greater degree of control. So again, don't worry about writing all of that down. In regards to supervised experience and parent allow listing, there are actually three really good videos on YouTube. They're 3-minute videos on YouTube explaining what they are and how you use them. And trust me, they're really easy to use. They're really easy. Again, I will put the links to those in that Word document once I send it out in the next few days. Okay. Coming on to the final aspect now, which is social media. Now, social media in its own right is enormous. It is absolutely huge, and there's really only one area that I want to concentrate on to a little bit more degree in this. Now, one of the common concerns that I always get, a very understandable concern, is how do you keep up with all the apps and everything that are out there? Well, like I said at the beginning of this, ladies and gents, I've been working in this area since 2006, and it is all I do. I do nothing else. And if I was to tell you that I can't keep up, then there's your answer. Because if I can't keep up, then you're not going to keep up. And actually, it's not important to keep up with everything that's out there. What's important is that you are aware of what your children are using, whether you're allowing them to use it or whether they're doing it behind your back. And usually it's not they're doing it behind your back deliberately, is that they're just not asking for permission, if that makes sense. So, I don't mean that in the negative. So again, don't try to keep up with all of these things. Just be aware of what your children are using or what you're allowing to use. So for example, when I go into schools, what I find is the more popular things that are out there that are being used very rarely changes. So for example, the top line on there, WhatsApp, Snapchat, and Instagram, not the slightest bit of change for years in terms of popularity on that. And then, other ones come around. TikTok came around a few years ago, and that's pretty much just blown everything else out of the water, quite frankly. Another newer one I'm seeing, I'll take a step back on that. A new one I'm seeing, which isn't actually new, which is an interesting one, is the one at the bottom right there called Discord. Discord has been around since 2015. It isn't new at all, but what is new is the popularity. This one came as a bit of a surprise to me. This one really crept up on me. So Discord pre-lockdown, that there was always a murmuring of Discord, but it was a very low level. And really, it was the domain of gamers, boys in particular, for whatever reasons I can't figure out. It generally was boys, though. And essentially what you would find is if they were playing on their Xbox or their PlayStation and, playing a game together, on a different device, such as a phone or an iPad, they would have Discord open and they would be chatting to each other. So it was basically, Discord was being used simply as a messaging and a chat app. That's all it was. Now Discord, in terms of functionality, it is very similar to WhatsApp in many ways. So, voice calling, messaging, chatting, chat groups, which in Discord are called servers. So if your child talks about servers or private servers, that's essentially the terminology within Discord. And what I found really interesting about this is, so that was pre-lockdown, and then we had that 2 years of lockdown, and then once I started to get back into schools post-lockdown, I was hearing Discord all over the place. It was huge, and when I was asking the children in terms of popularity, it was the majority of the classes that I was speaking to, and a very significant majority for that. But there was actually no rhyme or reason behind it. When I was asking the children, well, what are you using Discord for? And basically, they were using Discord in exactly the same way as they were using WhatsApp. It was just another one that they were using. There was no particular rhyme or reason for it. It was just because it was another messaging app. With that said, though, interestingly, I was down in a prep school a few weeks ago now, down on the South Coast. And I can't remember the name of the school, it doesn't matter. And in this class, I was speaking to some year threes, and we were actually talking about games. In fact, we were talking about Roblox. And some of the girls were sat literally just a few feet, excuse me, a few feet away from me. Excuse me. Some of those girls were sat just a few feet away from me, and I heard one of the girls, and she mumbled Discord, and I struggled to hear that, and I said, "What did you say?" And she said, "Discord." And I went, what do you mean? I don't understand what you mean, because we were talking about Roblox. And she said, well, when I'm playing Roblox, when I'm playing my games in Roblox, in these games, they will advertise their Discord server or their Discord chat group. And she says, so when they do that, I join those chat groups on Discord and I speak to other people that are in the game. Now that was a bit of a surprise to me, coming from a year three, but it just goes to show how these things can become popular for no reason. So what it seems now is in games such as Roblox, people are advertising their Discord servers, and everything else. If you're wondering how these things, how are children finding out about these things, a lot of it is actually coming from games and from YouTube as well. So why are they on there? Very, very simple. There are lots of different reasons, but in the main, it's simply, again, because they're friends. It's because of socialization. Sometimes it's they like to watch, their favorite influencers on TikTok and Snapchat and whatever else. And for those who are posting, which is a minority, by the way, it's a complete myth out there that all children and young people are posting videos and images. No, they're not in my experience. It's actually a minority that are doing so. And in the main, that minority, it is a means of self-expression. That is what they're essentially doing. And so what about in terms of the risks across social media in general? Well, to be blunt, it's everything. Social media is where we see all the main and most serious risks and issues, and literally I can't be any more blunt than that. You'll be well aware that the common age restriction across most social media is the age of 13. It is very, very rare to find one that is under 13. Some are 13, some are 16, some are 18, but more common than anything, it is 13. If you're allowing your children to use these apps, that is entirely your decision. I'm not here to tell you otherwise, and I'm certainly not here to judge you at all. That is not my job, to do that. Actually, I personally, I hazard, as I'm doing now, I stutter if I'm asked the question. I do get asked this question quite often. What would I allow my children, if they were under 13? They're not under 13, but if my children were under 13, would I allow them on social media? And it's one I always have to think about. And if I am bluntly honest, as a parent, not as a professional, but as a parent, would I allow my younger children on social media? The answer to that is yes, I would. The reason for that, and this is me, not you, this is me. The reason for that is because at the age of 13, children are already going through that very, very difficult and very challenging adolescent period. Suddenly allowing them into this wide world of social media at 13, at 14, at 15 is like, I couldn't imagine such a thing. I would much rather me, as a concerned dad, I would rather say, right, okay, at 10 years old, you're not supposed to be on here, but I think at 13, you're probably going to be going on here, whether I give permission or not. So I would rather give you permission. I'd rather give you my blessing, but we set up some rules. We use the account together, we discuss issues, we think about risks and issues, and we consider all of the features that may or may not be available. In other words, I would rather educate them in the use of social media from a younger age, if that makes sense. So again, that is just my opinion, if I was to be asked that question. So I'm now going to come on to sexual exploitation, ladies and gents. So please, once more, as a reminder, please do be aware of who is around you. Again, I'm not putting anything on screen apart from a few statistics. It's just in relation to what I am talking about. So the IWF, the Internet Watch Foundation, are an organisation based in Cambridge who do a very, very important and incredibly difficult job. It is their job to go online and hunt out and find and remove images and videos of children being sexually abused. That is what they do. Now, because of that, that incredibly important job, what they do is they feed out certain information at certain times of the year. And one of the most useful pieces of information is their annual reports that comes out usually towards the end of February. So we're actually expecting a new one in a few weeks' time, but it is always an incredibly good and it's an incredibly detailed report as well. I'm not going to go through the report. I want to go through one aspect, and that aspect is self-generated. What I mean by that is that I just need to contextualize the terminology that's being used here, because different people, organizations, etc., use different terminology. Self-generated is this. It is two sides of the same coin. So the most serious side of self-generated and the biggest side of self-generated is where a child or a young person is blackmailed, coaxed, coerced, whatever, into taking and sharing images and videos. The other side of that self-generated coin is where a child or a young person takes and shares images or videos, sexually explicit images or videos, where there has been no coercion from another person. So it's the same thing, slightly different. The biggest side is where there is coercion, and the real big worry, and it has been the real big worry over the past 18 months, is that the behaviours of offenders, they are shifting somewhat. And a lot of this coercion now is happening via live streaming. So it is children going live on cam. So you'll be well aware that there are thousands of apps that allow children to go live, thousands and thousands of websites. So, I'm not going to tell you that it's TikTok or it's Snapchat or it's YouTube, or whatever it is. It is any, live stream. And that's where we're seeing. So essentially what you're seeing on here, ladies and gents, are the figures. So I'll just walk you through this very, very quickly, because I don't want to labor on it. So in 2020, at the top left there, so this is the 2020 report for the 2019 statistics. So every year, the IWF analysts receive hundreds of thousands of public reports. So any member of the public, any organisation within the UK, they can go onto the IWF website and they can make an anonymous report on there to say, I think this is illegal, and the link is shared. So out of those hundreds of thousands of reports, the analysts have verified that 68,000 of those were illegal content. Now, when I say reports, one report isn't one image or one video. One report can be 1, 10 or hundreds of images or videos. So please bear that in mind. The next one in 2021 for the 2020 stats, that went up significantly to 153,000, which was all put down to lockdown. And in 2022 for the 21 statistics, has again risen significantly. Now, let's just be very, very careful with that figure. You can read anything you want into statistics. The fact is here in relation to this, the IWF have now got more analysts. They're using better technology. They're using better reporting methods. So we were bound to see an increase in relation to this. So again, just be very, very careful with the statistics. The biggest concern, though, as well as live streaming, the biggest concern is in relation to age. So In relation to the verified reports that the analysts have been going through, you can see that the 7 to 10-year-olds at 23% of all of those reports is now the fastest growing age range. The biggest age range has always been 11 to 13, girls in particular. That has always been the case, but the fastest growing is now the most concerning because of the rate at which it is increasing. Now, I know this is horrible as parents to hear of this sort of thing. And I know this may scare some parents, and I get that. It scares me, and I do this for a living. You know, I work with polyps, and I think it's awful. But knowledge is power, ladies and gents. We have to know these things in order to keep our children safe. Now, because of the concerns of 7 to 10-year-olds, earlier on last year, between January and July last year, the IWF did something that they don't normally do. They did a deep dive into the early statistics, and essentially what they found in the first half of last year, they had already found a 360% increase in relation to 7 to 10-year-olds. So I am dreading seeing the annual report when it comes out in just a few weeks' time. I'm now just going to very quickly, I've just noticed my time, and I'm going slightly over time here. I do apologize. We're in the last 2 or 3 minutes now, where I just want to go through a couple of resources for you. I've already mentioned Common Sense Media to you. Again, I will put all of these in the Microsoft Word documents for you over the next few days. Common Sense Media, by the way, does not just do games. It does apps, it does TV series, films, books, you name it. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a one-stop shop. Another one-stop shop is in relation to Internet Matters, which is just a fabulous website for parents. It is absolutely brilliant. Now, I know many parents will have questions in relation to how do you set up filters? What features are available on Instagram? Are there any parental features on TikTok? You know, all of these very understandable and very, very common questions. And you know, one of the common questions is how do I manage this? And the answer to that is, like the 4 C's, the content, the contact, the conduct, and the commercialism, simplify it. Simplifying it might take a bit more time, but simplify it. And what I mean by that is, first of all, consider different aspects. Think about it logically. So first of all, think about your house. What have you got in your house? And the answer to that is the network in your house, whether it's Wi-Fi or whether it's wired or a mix of two, all of that has to come in via your broadband feed. That's it. So have you got something on your broadband feed like a content filter? That's the first thing to think about. The next thing to think about is what devices are in your household that your child might use. Are there PlayStations and Xboxes and iPads and iPhones and, you know, Amazon Alexas and, you know, HomePod minis and, you know, all of these things out there? What parental features are available on these devices? And this is the bit that takes the time, you know, to figure this out. And then once you've got the devices, it's what about the individual games and apps that your children are using? Do these features, do these things have features available within them? And that's the way to think about it. Don't try to be overwhelmed with everything that's out there. Go from the house to the devices to the games and apps. Just do it in that order and do it logically. Now, so if you go in that order and do it logically, well, how do you find out, you know, what to do? The answer, ladies and gents, is Internet Matters. It really is. And again, I will put these links on the Word document for you. So I'll put the direct links to these particular pages. So as you can see on the screen there, they've got all the guides possible, anything you can imagine on there for smartphones, for search engines, for broadband networks, for social media apps, for gaming consoles. It is all on there. And all of it is really, really simple to follow. I promise you, it is simple to follow. It is all written in a language specifically for parents who are non-technical. It's deliberately done that way to help as many people as possible out there. Like I say, it does take a little bit of time. And not only that, is features do tend to chop and change a little bit. So, for example, Instagram, I think it was either yesterday or the day before, have brought out one or two new features within Instagram. TikTok have been changing things over the past few months. So it's just worth revisiting these every few months just to see if anything has changed. So also on Internet Matters, you've got guides in relation to the ages of your children if you want to get a bit deeper into certain aspects, because I haven't really covered a lot here this evening. There's even, whole sections on online gaming, the positives, the negatives. How do you open up conversations with children? What do you talk to the children about? And even, social media hubs, exactly the same thing as well. But don't forget, ladies and gents, all of these things are tools, filters, parental features. These are just tools. They are not solutions. They can only help you with that very difficult job of parenting. And the only thing that really works in this context is, much as I said with the Andrew Tate example earlier on in this talk, is that very open and honest, non-judgmental talk with your children, and keeping those talks going, setting the restrictions and monitoring in relation to what they're doing. And of course, us modeling good behavior as well. Children get their habits from us parents, so we have to model that good behavior. Good digital skills. They've got to have digital skills. That's their future. So it is utterly pointless, blocking them from absolutely everything. These are the skills that they've got to have in the future. And these are the skills they get at school. It's important that we do this. And please, finally, do remember, try not to concentrate on time too much. Time is important. It absolutely is, but it's a balance. It's about screen use. That's the important thing. And don't forget, screen use for most children and young people is all about socialization. That is the biggest one of all. Ladies and gents, I've gone significantly over time. I've just seen that. I'm really sorry. But as you can see, there is so much to go through. I've tried to simplify that as much as I possibly can. And I know there was a lot in there. But once again, sorry to sound like a broken record, the links and things I will put into a Word document for you over the next few days. So please don't panic about any of that. I will call it to an end there, ladies and gents. And thank you again so much for coming along this evening. And I will pass back on to Mrs. Squire. Thank you, Tiffany.